Okay, we're here in the refurbished Volozhin Yeshiva. We're continuing with the history of the Volozhin Yeshiva, which was opened in 1803. The building was opened in 1806. The Reb Chaim Volozhiner served as the first Rosh Yeshiva until 1821. His son, Rav Itzela Volozhin, who is mentioned in the introduction, he wrote the introduction on Nefesh HaChaim. He became the next Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Itzela was very involved in communal affairs, and it's very interesting to note that he worked hand in hand with the Tzemach Tzedek of Lubavitch, going many times to St. Petersburg to speak to the government on behalf of Jewish needs. Because Rabbi Itzela Volozhin, the son of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, was very involved in communal affairs, his son-in-law, his two sons-in-law, really served at the helm of the yeshiva. Who were the two son-in-laws of Rabbi Itzela of Volozhin? Number one, Rabbi Eliezer Isaac Fried, who became Rosh Yeshiva at age 30. And the other son-in-law was the more reticent Naftali Tzvi Yehuda of Berlin. Of the two, between Rabbi Eliezer Isaac Fried and the Netziv, Rabbi Eliezer Isaac Fried was much more popular. So he assumed the role as the main Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin. And so, when Rabbi Itzela of Volozhin passed away, the mantle of Rosh Yeshiva Shaft, the mantle of Rosh Yeshiva Shaft was taken over by Rabbi Eliezer Isaac Fried in the year 1849. The only thing was, Rabbi Eliezer Isaac Fried was very sickly. So after 4 years, he passed away, and the Netziv becomes the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin. So you'd expect it would be unanimous that the Netziv should be the Rosh Yeshiva. However, Rabbi Eliezer Isaac Fried had a son-in-law by the name of Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the Beis Halevi. And the Beis Halevi's Shiurim dazzled the Talmidim. So now there became somewhat of a rivalry between the son-in-law of Rabbi Itzela Volozhin and the grandson of Rabbi Itzela Volozhin, the Beis Halevi. So they basically split the role of the Rosh Yeshiva. But this became an untenable situation, as you can imagine. You're going to have the Netziv, and you're going to have the Beis Halevi. Who's responsible for the finances of the yeshiva? Because after all, the Rosh Yeshiva is the one who's responsible to support the yeshiva. So they convened a Bezdin. Who was on the Bezdin? Number one, Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan. Number two, the Nachlas David, Rabbi David Teva. Number three, Rabbi Yosef Slutzker. Number four, the Maggid of Vilna. The Maggid of Vilna, Rabbi Velvel, he said, you know what this feels like to me? It feels like Parshas Vayeshev. Why Parshas Vayeshev? Because if you look in Bereshis, there's contention between Adam and the snake, good and bad. In Noach, good and bad, Noach and the people. Parshas Lech Lecha, Abraham and Terach. Then you have Abraham and Yishmael, Yitzchak and Yishmael, Yaakov and Esav. There's always a fight between good and evil. Not until Parshas Vayeshev is it the fight between good and good, Yosef and the brothers. So says the Maggid of Vilna, the fight between the Netziv and the Beis Halevi is Parshas Vayeshev. Ultimately, the Bezdin Paskin, that both the Netziv and the Beis Halevi could give shir, but the mantle of Rosh Yeshiva Shaft went to the Netziv. But the Beis Halevi very soon stepped down, and he started the Brisk dynasty, and the Netziv now is at the mantle of the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin. However, the Netziv's granddaughter marries the Beis Halevi's son. Okay, so in the contention between the Beis Halevi and the Netziv won. The Beis Halevi stepped down, but the Beis Halevi has a son, Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim marries the Netziv's granddaughter. So the Netziv invites Reb Chaim, the Beis Halevi's son, to come back to Volozhin, and they both split the Shiurim in Volozhin between the Netziv and Reb Chaim. Now, the approaches to learning of the Netziv and Reb Chaim were polar opposites. Reb Chaim held, if you understand one blot of Shas, you know the whole Shas. The Netziv held, if you know the whole Shas, you can understand one blot of Shas. The Netziv held, you can't understand one blot unless you know the whole Shas. The Reb Chaim held, if you know one blot, you know the whole Shas. This was the two different pathways of learning in Volozhin. Now actually, Volozhin had a different system than any other yeshiva at the time. You see, in some yeshivas, they learn sugyas. So let's say you're learning Ksubis, you'll learn Tainas Pesulim, then you'll jump to Avelos, and you'll jump to Psikre Shigolei Nichale, and you'll jump to Daf Test Svek Sveika, and then Bari V'Shema. In some yeshivas, they learn straight, and they focus on sugyas. In Volozhin, they learned Kol HaTorah Kula. Every area was treated equally. You learn the whole Masechta from beginning to end. You learn Mechilta. You learn Sifra. The Netziv gave Shiurim on Chumash and Rashi. Hence, the Netziv's Perosh, Hamek Davar. Don't be fooled by the Hamek Davar edition in that glass case. This was not the original edition of the Hamek Davar. But this is a little bit of the background of the yeshiva. In the year 1887, the government forced the yeshiva to have Russian in their curriculum. So they try to be yotzei by taking a minyan of Bachrim, sending them across the street, and whichever Bachrim wanted to dabble in that, the Rosh Yeshivas allow them across the street to learn a few other subjects. But eventually, this was not enough for the government. So the yeshiva had to make a decision. Can the yeshiva remain open because the government was demanding secular studies from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And a Bezdin was convened. And you know who ultimately was on that Bezdin? The Beis Halevi. And it was decided that the Volozhin yeshiva has to close down. And they opened up the Aron, and they took out the Sifrei Torah, and they marched the Sifrei Torah out of Volozhin, and the doors were locked, and that was the end of the Volozhin yeshiva. And they would go early in the morning, and they would see footsteps in the snow, and they would see every morning the Netziv would come to the yeshiva, broken-hearted, crying at the door that his beloved Beis HaMikdash had to be closed. Ultimately, the Netziv heads to Eretz Yisrael, but he became deathly ill in Warsaw, and he passed away in Warsaw. He's buried in the Warsaw Cemetery. And you know who's buried right next to him? Reb Chaim Brisker, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, is buried right next to the Netziv. But the Chafetz Chaim said that the closing of the Volozhin Yeshiva was the birth of Torah for Klal Yisrael, because from there it spawned many yeshivas all over Europe, and this is the mother of all yeshivas, and even in its closing, it gave birth to many, many yeshivas that came from the Volozhin Yeshiva.